Everybody, welcome Dr. Audia, founder of Audia Physical Therapy. Welcome, Dr. Audia. The floor is yours.
All right. Hi, everybody. I'm more of a stander here, so let me reorganize my office here. This is a new experience for me because I'm used to talking to people in person in a large crowd, so I'm trying to get a little bit more tech savvy. As Kurt said, my name is Dr. Matthew Audia, and I'm a doctor of physical therapy. And today I want to talk to you about adapting neuro-rehab to create lasting change. And welcome to my passion. My passion is advancing the field of neurological physical therapy. I'm a doctor of physical therapy with 15 years of experience working in physical therapy, specializing especially in stroke and traumatic brain injury. I have experience in every setting of stroke rehab from Boston to San Diego. That's working in ICU, PCU, TCU, acute care, long-term acute care, acute rehab, skilled nursing facilities, home health, outpatient orthopedics, and outpatient neuro. I have over 1,000 hours of continuing education, and I'm an advanced trained neuro-IFRA therapist. Really, all you need to know about neuro-IFRA is that it's an advanced approach for working with patients with a stroke or traumatic brain injury. And as Kurt said, I'm also owner and lead therapist at Audia Physical Therapy, which is a specialized outpatient neurological therapy center for working with patients with a stroke, traumatic brain injury, or any neurological disorders. And this topic came to me because of a question that's been burning in my mind for years. You see, I had these two patients, we'll call them Simone and Garfunkel. Maybe you've heard their music. They're similar age, and they both had very similar strokes in the same area of the brain with the same side hemiparesis. Both of them had private caregivers, unlimited access to therapy. They stated they were motivated to reach their goals, and they had a supportive family and similar long-term goals. And they also had the same therapist, me. They had similar functional starting points, and they were very active pre-injury. So who made better progress? If they were able to get the same therapy with all the same starting points, why did one make amazing recovery and continue to amaze, Simone, while the other one started to make amazing recovery, but then something happened and they slowly declined? Well, to figure out the answer to this question, I really had to do a lot of digging. And I think we had to start with, man, what was the difference? You know, was it their emotions? Was it their motivation? Was it their mindset? Or were their habits just too deeply ingrained that they couldn't change? Well, what is change? What is this type of change that we're trying to bring about in neurological physical therapy? Well, Charles Darwin said, it's not the strongest of species that survives, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. That means we don't need to be the strongest or the most intelligent to change. We just need to be responsive to that change. And so I guess the first question is, how can we be the most responsive to change? Well, change is kind of funny. A very wise person once told me that all our patients will agree to these fantastic goals. We want to walk, we want to stand, we want to run, I want to use my arm, I want to get back to shuffling cards and playing golf. But agreeing to the goal and agreeing to the process to reach the goal are two different things. New clicker, sorry. So where does this lasting change come from? Well, many of you have already heard of this term, but neuroplasticity is the thing that happens in our brain that allows this type of lasting change. We have anywhere between 86 and 100 billion neurons in our brain, and those neurons talk to each other through these connections called synapses. Neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to form and reorganize these synaptic connections in response to learning, experience, and especially after injury. This is the reason why we can get better. This is the reason why you have a stroke or you have a traumatic brain injury, you go to therapy and you start getting better, you start recovering, because our brain can adapt. These other neurons can be trained and learn to take over the role of the neurons that died. Neuroplasticity is the reason why we are allowed this lasting change. And so what else do we know about change? Well, we know the goal of physical therapy is to create that functional change. We know it's because of neuroplasticity. And so physical therapy needs to happen in the brain. So why are so many people still looking at therapy as exercise? Well, I mean, therapeutic exercise is one of the things that physical therapists do. We do targeted therapeutic exercise. We also work on therapeutic activities to help make you more functional. We work on gait training, which improves your walking. We do lots of different things, but where the real meat of neurological physical therapy is in neuromuscular re-education. That's where we specialize. That's where we're affecting the brain. And this neuromuscular re-education is defined as training or retraining the muscles, the brain, and the nerves used to communicate between the two of them to improve movement, strength, balance, and function. So here we are, we're stimulating the brain to affect the body, and we're stimulating the body to affect the brain. These two are inextricably linked. And so we cannot just look at this as just simply exercise. So how do we keep producing that change? How do we take that change now? And how do we continue to be the most adaptive? Well, I did a lot of research on the information that patients with a stroke or traumatic brain injury were getting via the internet, via different sites, via different experts. And there's a lot of advice on there, but when it comes to physical therapy, the advice they classically give is work hard and listen to your physical therapist, right? Well, that's good advice. I mean, we know that effort's important. We know we have to put in the work because the harder we try, the more alert and engaged we are, and the better or worse the outcome, the bigger the change, right? But working is not the same as progress. You see, just working hard and giving that effort doesn't necessarily help us to reach those goals. Focused effort is a different story. And I like to give this type of equation here, that effort times focus equals change, or the magnitude of that change. You see, if we gave each one a number, if you have 100 in effort and 0 in focus, boy, you can be trying all you want, you're sweating, but you're not creating any change. And the more focus we have along with that effort, the greater our change can become. Now, what's focus? Focus is simply a point of concentration or directed attention. So if we're directing our attention and our effort, we can create and we can improve the magnitude of the change in our body and brain. Focus is like a muscle, and it should be worked like one. So in order to improve focus, what do? Well, the research is overwhelming on meditation. Meditation, especially mindfulness meditation, can help improve your focus, your prolonged attention, self-awareness. It can decrease stress, which increases resilience that helps to fight stress. It can decrease your blood pressure and calm the emotional lower brain so that your rational thinking upper brain has the ability to prioritize your attention. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. I'm not here to teach you how to meditate. However, if you are interested in meditation to help build your focus, there's a great app called Headspace. Headspace, you can download it right on your phone, and it will teach you guided meditation. The first 10 meditations are free, and you can continue going through those meditations so that you can continue to learn and hone that skill. A few people that meditate and swore by it: Steve Jobs, Kobe Bryant, and Jerry Seinfeld. But let's get back to the other differences. Now we understand that obviously we need to give effort in therapy, and that effort needs to be focused effort. The amount of effort and focus are equally important to creating the magnitude of our change. But what else can actually occur to help that change become more permanent? How can we help that change to last? We feel good at the end of therapy. Maybe we learned something, but maybe we have a hard time making that stick. So let's start with motivation. The single most important predictor of recovery is motivation. And the extent to which we change depends on that motivation. We know that. Everybody knows. This is not groundbreaking material here. We know that a highly motivated person has a better chance of recovery than a person with low motivation. But here's what I didn't know when I started doing this research. All motivation is not equal. In fact, there are different types of motivation, and the different types of motivation matter. This information comes from Dr. Michael Merzenich, who's one of the most well-respected neuroscientists in the world, and basically received the equivalent of the Nobel Prize for neuroscience. You see, there's two different types of motivation. He defines them as performance motivation and mastery motivation, but I like to rename them. Performance motivation, I like to call the need to, have to motivation. And mastery motivation, I like to call the want to, like to. You see, the people with the need to, have to motivation, they say a lot of negative things. They feel that the work they put in is not a choice, it's a chore. You see, they say things like, I don't want to, it's tiring, this is hard. Damn, we have to do this again? Do I have to? Let's get this over with. Make it quick. I hate this. All this negative speech leads them to, regardless of their outcome, they feel either bad or indifferent about it. And how we feel matters. You see, our brain has this remarkable ability to first record changes and then decide after the fact whether we make it part of our permanent record. That's a really important thing. You see, what we realize about the brain is it's not just what we do, it's how we feel about what we do. And so our type of motivation really matters. So these need to, have to, these people with a need to, have to motivation have this negative speech and they feel bad or indifferent about it afterwards. And that leads to short-term learning. The brain looks at looks at all this information at the end of the day and it says, well, that wasn't too important, and it throws it out the window, right? Now, conversely, these people with the want to, like to, or the mastery motivation, these people say more positive things. They see their therapy as a choice, as an opportunity. They just say things like, this is cool. This is awesome. Can we do this again? How can I do this better? How can I do this at home? What else can I do? I love this. It helps them to feel good. Dare I say even amazing about their outcomes, no matter how large or small they are. And our brain encodes that information later on and helps it to make it more permanent. That creates long-term learning. So the type of motivation that we have matters. Well, what happens if we're in the need to, have to side? How do we bring ourselves over to the mastery, the want to, like tos? Well, we have to understand that motivation becomes easier when we transform a chore into a choice. See, you have the right to you have the right to stay exactly where you are. You don't need to get better, but do you want to? We have to understand that everything we do is still a choice. And that brings about a sense of control and can energize us and help us to feel better about things. It also helps to tie your actions to a larger meaning. You see, Marines are trained to do this to motivate themselves during really tough times. During Marine training, they have to go through something called the crucible at the end of their training, which is a 3-day grueling 50-mile hike where they have to crawl and get riddled with different obstacles. Injuries are expected and it becomes incredibly hard. And at the very end, there's something called the Grim Reaper. I'm not going to pretend I know what that is, but it doesn't sound good, let's be honest. And at the end, when things are at their most miserable, Marines are trained by their drill sergeant to ask a why question. They'll turn and they'll ask each other, why am I doing this? Why are you doing this? And they'll inevitably answer, to build a better life for my family, to become a Marine that I've always dreamed of, to serve my country and make everyone I know proud. So we have to think about, what are these goals that you're setting in therapy or in life mean to you? What do they mean to your life? What does simply doing some exercise that changes the brain outside of therapy mean to your life? What does working hard in physical therapy or outside of physical therapy, what does that mean? That if you can stand on one leg and if you can start walking farther, right? What does that mean? We have to keep an open mind because change is mostly limited to situations your brain is in the mood for. So you see, when we keep an open mind, it creates the possibility for creativity and possibility. A closed mind reinforces our negative and limited thinking. So if we believe something can be done, our mind goes to work for us. It bolsters our argument with more reasons why it's possible. Whereas when we have a closed mind, it does the exact opposite. Dr. Carol Dweck, American author and famed psychologist, came up with 2 different types of personalities. She calls them a fixed mindset and a growth mindset. And based on these 2 types of personalities, they can affect the way that we see the world. They affect our perspective. I think we can understand which one we want to be on the side of considering this brick wall and these nice plants over here. But let's briefly go through them. You see, people with a fixed mindset are constrained by their own beliefs. They document their abilities and talents rather than see them as something to be developed. You see, they'll say things like, I'm not good at running. I'm not strong. I've never been good at math. I'm not a good public speaker, right? And when it comes to rehab, they believe things will either happen or they won't, and that limits their potential. Conversely, people with a growth mindset are open to continued vast potential. They believe that their abilities can grow with time and experience. Instead of saying, I'm not a good runner, they say, I'm not a good runner yet, but I'm working on it. I'm not a great public speaker yet, but I think with time and energy, I can continue to improve. They understand that they're at a starting point in whatever aspect they're looking at, and that improvement is possible. So, okay, so we don't want to be in a fixed mindset or a growth. We want to be in a growth mindset, right? The difference between these two, most notably though, is how they deal with failure. A person in a fixed mindset, after stating exactly how they feel, let's say, I'm not a good public speaker, we say, right? Well, when they have a mistake or when they have a failure, right? This hurts their self-image, right? Because they've defined themselves already by not a good speaker, not a good runner, not strong, not good at math, right? And when they have that failure, it hurts and disheartens them, and it hurts the way they feel, and that limits their potential. Whereas a person with a growth mindset sees failure as something to learn from and something to get better from. It's a starting point. It's a learning opportunity, and that opens them to vast potential for change. So, great. What if I have a fixed mindset about these different things? And it's important to understand that we can have a fixed mindset about one thing, I'm not a good runner, and we can have a growth mindset about another thing. I'm not great at public speaking, but I could be better if I continue to work at it, right? How do we change from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset in order to help our change? Well, first and foremost, we have to increase our self-awareness. We have to understand the things that we're saying out loud and to ourselves. We have to view failure in a different light. Failure is not the end of the world. Failure is a mistake. Failure is an opportunity, and it sheds light on the things that we can improve on to continue to get better. And we need to embrace that learning that helps us to get better and embrace the challenges that come with it, because the harder we work and the more focused we are, the greater the magnitude of the outcome. How about if you notice somebody with a fixed mindset? How about if you notice this type of speech? Oh, you know, I was talking with someone the other day, and oh man, they were really talking about that. This might be lighting up some things right now, and you might be thinking about someone right now that has a fixed mindset. Well, we need to avoid the fixed mindset traps when we're complimenting them. So we need to avoid things like, you're really smart, you're strong, your balance is great. Carol Dweck would actually say that we need to compliment the effort and the focus, I would add, and tie it to the outcome. So instead of just saying, great job, you had a great walk, we can say, hey, you're working hard and your focus, and it shows in the way that you're walking. Hey, that dedication of time and energy is showing in how you balance and walk. Wow, that strength you just showed is amazing. You must really be focusing, and you must really be working hard to have achieved that. This changes the way people think. This changes the way the person thinks, and allows them to understand that it's the work they're putting in, that it's the effort that they're putting in that's getting them there, not just that they're at this point. Because the way you feel really matters. It really matters. I can't emphasize that enough. And our emotions can be our best ally or our worst foe. I promised I would come back to this. You see, there's different parts of the brain, and the amygdala and the hippocampus are in the lower brain. They're in the limbic system. And this system deals with emotion. And when our emotions become too overpowering, they strangle the upper part of our brain, or the neocortex, the rational thinking, prioritizing part of our brain. And it can shut it off. So think about this for a second. Let's say you got in an argument with somebody, okay? I'm sure everybody's been there, right? And you get so angry, suddenly maybe you say something you don't mean, or maybe you just storm off, right? And later on, about 30 minutes later, you're in the car, or you're taking a walk, or you're somewhere else, and all of a sudden you're thinking about it, and you go, that's what I should have said. Ah, I knew it, right? But you couldn't. You couldn't say it at that time because you were just so angry, or just so flustered, or just so upset. Well, that's because our emotions can take over the upper rational thinking part of our brain and shut it off for a period of time. We lose the ability to prioritize our attention and think rationally, and that makes us overwhelmed. So controlling our emotions is very important. Understanding that, well, okay, that's good to think about controlling our emotions, but remember, self-awareness is key. That's the first step. And we have to understand that initial changes that are made can be temporary. That means you can do great in therapy one day, you can do something one day, and the next day you can say, I'm having a hard time finding that again, right? Because how you feel about that failure matters, what we talked about already. And how you feel about success matters too. As we said, the amygdala is responsible for emotion and behavior. That's the section of our brain that it can encode our memories. Think of it this way. If you're writing down notes right now, the amygdala would be the part that would highlight a section and write it in big bold letters and save it for later. But the hippocampus is the most interesting part of our emotional brain. The hippocampus is responsible for mood, memory, learning, and emotion. That's right. Whoever created our brain put memory and learning in the same place with mood and emotion. Once again, the two are inextricably linked. We said already, you have 86 to 100 billion neurons in your brain by the time you're an adult. But here's something we didn't know until recently. In certain areas of our brain, we actually grow new neurons. Wait, hold on a second, Matt. You're telling me that we can grow new neurons? No, nobody said this before. Well, it's actually very recent research over the last decade or so. And this concept is called neurogenesis. In certain sections of our brain, we can grow new neurons. And it turns out that in the hippocampus, once again, responsible for mood, memory, learning, and emotion, we can grow up to 700 new neurons a day. It's called adult neurogenesis. And the interesting thing is that this neurogenesis can be affected. In fact, our memory is linked to our mood. The more depressed we are, the worse our memory and learning can be. And the higher we are, and the more positive we are, the better our memory and learning can be. That's why it's so important. Preventing neurogenesis can impair cognitive function and learning. So, okay, so we have these neurons that are growing in a certain section of our emotional brain. Great, what's the point? Well, you see, when we increase the number of naive, impressionable neurons that can be easily conditioned, we increase our potential for learning. That means the emotions and mood are linked inextricably to learning and memory. And so once again, emotions matter. Well, you said we can affect that neurogenesis, these new neurons that are coming out. Well, what increases neurogenesis? What increases that section? That sounds important, Matt. Yeah, it is. It's very important. And it turns out that learning increases it, especially activity learning. So neuroplasticity, the change in your brain, leads to more neurogenesis, right? The two are linked.
Hi, sweetheart.
The more,
how's it going?
The more that we're talking.
How you doing? You come to say hi? Yeah.
So,
My feet don't smell like anything because they don't go anywhere. Just right here. Dogs always get so confused because my feet don't have smells.
So increasing neurogenesis, you can increase it via activity-dependent learning, mild positive stress. Think of mild positive stress as motivation. Sex, that's an important thing to know. Cardiovascular activity and a healthy diet. Things like omega-3 fatty acids that are found in salmon, fatty fish, and avocados. Also things like flavonoids that are found in blueberries and dark chocolate. You're welcome, Mom. I know she loves dark chocolate. Things that decrease neurogenesis are things like negative or chronic stress, sleep deprivation, and unfortunately, aging does decrease neurogenesis. It decreases, but it doesn't stop. Poor diets, high in saturated fats and alcohol, can decrease neurogenesis. And here's something that Japanese researchers just found out, that a soft diet can actually decrease neurogenesis. So things that are crunchy and involve more chewing or mastication actually increase neurogenesis, whereas a softer diet that you don't have to chew as much decreases it. So, okay, Matt, we're talking about emotions. You're telling me they're very important. You're saying I have to walk around all day with a big smile on my face? Well, no, you don't have to walk around all day with a big smile on your face, but having a positive state does actually help our brain to work better. This information comes from a Harvard researcher and famed researcher on the study of happiness. You see, society tends to think that that happiness revolves around success. And so we set a goal, and once we get to that goal, then we'll be happy. And once we're there, we set another goal. And so again, we keep moving the goalpost. And once we get to that next goal, we'll be happy. But we keep moving the goalpost over and over again. And this makes our happiness very difficult because we tie our happiness to that success. In reality, research will tell you that it's actually the other way around. Success revolves around happiness. And that's the difference. Research will tell us that happier people, or people in a more positive state, are more successful. And it backs it up. Our brains actually perform significantly better at positive state than compared to negative, neutral, or stressed. We're 31% more productive. We're 37% better at sales. And doctors are 19% faster and more accurate at finding diagnosis when in a positive state, as opposed to a negative, neutral, or stressed state. So just be happy, right, Matt? Well, doesn't sound very easy, right? Just plaster a smile on your face. No, there's actually ways that we can affect our happiness, and they're well researched. In fact, what they found out is that writing down 3 things you're thankful for every day for 21 days will actually train our brain to scan our environment for the positive things as opposed to the negative. By training our brain to search for the things that are more positive, we train our brain to be happier. Journaling a positive experience actually helps your brain relive it. And we know that exercise can release multiple things in our brain that help us to be happier. And meditation helps us to focus so that we can have more of a focused, and so that we can pay more attention to our task at hand. The one that I would say that's most important right here is really being able to spend 2 minutes a day with a pen and paper and write down 3 things you're grateful for. This works. I've tried it. I would actually say in the essence of focus, you could even write down just one. And whenever you're having a hard time during the day, you go back and think about that one thing that you're thankful about during the day. It increases resilience, decreases stress, and actually might even put a smile on your face. That creates a positive habit of seeing positive things in our environment. And that brings me to our last one, habits. Aristotle said, we are what we repeatedly do. Therefore, excellence is not an act, but a habit. And so when we talk about habits, I want to talk about one simple research study that they did. They took a mouse and they stuck this mouse with all the electrodes on this little mouse's brain in a maze. And at the end of the maze, they put the cheese. The mouse is in one spot, the cheese is in the other. And they watched the mouse's brain and they studied the mouse's brain as he went through the whole maze and eventually found the cheese. They saw the mouse's brain light up all over the place. Well, they did the same experiment over and over and over again, day after day, week after week, until they saw something that was most important. You see, every time the mouse was put in the maze, he was put in the same exact spot. And the cheese was put in the same exact spot. The mouse is dropped into the maze, and eventually what they see is that only one very small section of the brain lit up and nothing else. This section is called the basal ganglia, the oldest part of our brain. And that section is where our habits lie. That's right. When we do something that is habitual, it actually is completely unconscious to us sometimes, depending on the strength of the habit. And so this mouse is is dropped in the maze, and before the mouse even thinks, he's already taken 2 lefts and a right and he's eating the cheese. I think a lot of us understand this, you know. Sometimes we come home and we open the fridge, before you know it, we're munching on something, we don't even realize we did that. We have a lot of habits that end up like this. And I get this question a lot. Matt, this bad habit, it's just automatic. There's nothing I can do about it, right? Or I get another question. Matt, I'm working so hard at this. When is it going to become automatic? Well, I think if we sub out the word automatic in rehab and we replace it with habits, we'll start to understand it. Once we understand these habits, we can start to understand the concept of automaticity. And really, our awareness is the key point here. So to understand habits, there's a very simple loop here created by Charles Duhigg, the author of The Power of Habit. Habits have three points. They start with a cue. And a cue can be anything from a location, time of day, an emotional state, exposure to other people, or a pattern of behavior that triggers certain routines. The routine, right? The routine is the habit, right? Let's say you're smoking, you get stressed, that's the cue. Your routine is you go out for a cigarette and your reward is you're calmer afterwards, right? So we have to first understand this habit and then understand how it works and how we can either change it or create a new one. So in order to change a habit, let's take an example of myself, all right? When I wake up in the morning, that's my cue, the time of day, right? I identified the routine. The routine is I want to stop using my phone so much. Well, the first thing I do in the morning is I reach over for my cell phone and I start checking the news, email, all these other things. My reward is that I end up being awake. The screen actually lights up my brain a little bit and allows me not to go back to sleep because it's a bright screen. So there's my habit. My habit is that I wake up in the morning and I grab my phone, and before I know it, 15, 20 minutes have passed by while I'm lying in bed and I'm still on the phone. Well, in order to change that, we have to do a couple things. First of all, we have to isolate the routine. The routine is I grab my phone. We have to understand the cue. The cue is when I wake up, right? And then we have to experiment with rewards. Well, let's say I change things around a little bit. Let's say I move my nightstand a little bit farther. That way I have to get up and grab my phone when my alarm goes off, right? That might change things because now I'm standing already. Let's say I do something else. I put my phone in the other room and I use a different type of alarm, right? Either way, the reward is that I wanted to be awake, right? Let's take another one. Let's take the author's habit. Charles Duhigg talked about his habit of going during work to eat a cookie, right? He was doing this every day to the point where he actually gained 8 pounds and his wife started calling him fluffy. I'm not sure if she used that word, but I like the word fluffy. So he wanted to start losing weight, so he had to start figuring out what he was doing. It turns out that at the same point in the day, between 3 and 3:30, he would get up from his desk, walk up to the cafeteria and get a cookie. He would come back, he would chat with some people, and then he would come back and sit down at his desk. This led to him gaining 8 pounds, right? And his wife calling him fluffy, I think. Well, what happens is now he took a look at the cue and he wanted to experiment now with the rewards. The rewards are really the entire point of a habit, right? We have a habit because we experiment with those rewards. So he checked at this point in time between 3 and 3:30. The time was the cue. And this time, he got up during the day and he put on sneakers and he went for a walk. Another day, he went up to the cafeteria and he bought a candy bar instead of a cookie and he ate it at his desk. And another day, he walked up to the cafeteria and he didn't buy anything. He just chatted with some friends for a little while and then went back to his desk. Well, it turns out that the best reward he could imagine here was actually socializing with his friends. Walking up to the cafeteria had nothing to do with buying a cookie. It was just part of the habit that he had while he got up and socialized with his friends. So to change that habit, he used the same cue between 3 and 3:30, but he changed the routine. This time he just got up every day, went and chatted with some friends for about 10 to 15 minutes, and then went back to his desk. and he got the same reward. So we can change our habits. We can change our habits with the same cue and a different routine if we can experiment with the reward. What does that mean? Like, are there good habits that you can create? Yeah. Create a good cue to get that routine and start doing it, have a plan for it so that you can continue to feel that reward. Are there bad habits that you need to change? Isolate the cue, understand the routine, right? And the reward. And then practice under the same cue, changing the routine. And you'll see over a period of time, habits can change actually quite easily when we understand them. So now we understand that motivation is very important. Focused effort is important. Our emotions matter, right? And our habits and mindset have a great deal to do with our lasting change. But what does this all have to do with Simone and Garfunkel, right? Well, after doing all this research, now I understand that Garfunkel had performance motivation. He said, let's get this over with. Make it quick. Do we have to do this all the time? This led to a lot of negative talk that consistently increased his depression and decreased his activity. He had a very strong fixed mindset about himself, and anything he failed at crushed him, and he didn't want to try it anymore. He had a closed mind. He was stressed, sleep deprived, and had a poor diet, and he refused to experiment with habit-changing behaviors. This led him to make initial progress, remember, but eventually he started to decline. Simone, on the other hand, had that want to, like to motivation, that mastery motivation. She saw her therapy as a choice, as an opportunity. She spoke positively and emphasized her positive progress, no matter how small it was, even if it was just the slightest twitch of her finger. She made her work a choice and tied it to a greater meaning. The meaning for her was being able to spend more time with her daughters, to ride a bike, to golf, to have an independent life. And she constantly improved her focus with meditation. She used a growth mindset and open mind to do whatever it took, and she had a healthy diet. She did cardio, and she made sure to have some fun. And she understood the power that she had to change these good and bad habits and put it to work. So I ask you, what's affecting your change? Is it your motivation? Or do you have a performance need to type of motivation? Do you have a mastery motivation where you understand that this is a choice? Do you have a fixed or a growth mindset? Are your emotions standing in your way, or are they working for you? And do you have some bad habits that you could change, or some good habits that you could create? You see, this is the power of our brain. If you argue for your limitations, you get to keep them. But if you argue for your possibilities, you get to create them. This is the power that our brain has to create lasting change. Thank you.